My name is Helena Ward. 2 weeks before our family trip to Santorini, my mother looked across the kitchen table and said, "You don't belong on this trip. It's for family." The words hit sharper than the edge of her coffee mug. I waited for her to smirk, to turn it into one of her dry jokes. But she didn't. She just folded the itinerary again. Neat as a funeral program. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone when he added, "Yeah. It'd be weird if you went." His tone was casual, like he was commenting on the weather. I stared at the printed flight confirmations spread between us, the ones I'd paid for, and said quietly, "You mean the trip I booked?" My mother smiled without warmth. "It's easier this way." "You're intense." The word hung in the air like an insult disguised as concern. I felt my pulse steady instead of rise. If I'm not part of the family, neither is my money. She blinked, confused for a second, then dismissed me with that same gentle cruelty she used when I was 12. I stood, took my laptop from the counter, and logged into my airline account. The silence was so clean I could hear the soft tap of each key as I canceled the villa, the flights, the car service. The refund hit instantly. When the email notification sounded on her phone, her head jerked up. Marcus finally looked at me. "What did you just do?" I met his stare. "I fixed your itinerary." Then I walked out, leaving the sound of their disbelief behind me. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Some things collapse more beautifully when you let them fall on their own. The next morning, my phone rang before I'd even finished my coffee. My father didn't say hello. "You destroyed months of planning," he shouted, voice cracking through the receiver. I waited for him to run out of breath, then said, "You can still go. Just pay for it yourselves." The silence on the other end was long enough for me to hear him inhale sharply before hanging up. The quiet that followed wasn't relief, it was recalibration. 3 days passed without a word. The house stayed unnaturally still, like it was holding its breath. On the 4th morning, Lydia from HR called, her tone cautious. "Your father said you're taking personal leave. Should I forward your emails to him?" I stared at the message on my screen. "No," I said evenly. "You shouldn't forward anything." She hesitated, whispering, "He's locking you out." "Isn't he?" I didn't answer. When I tried to log into the firm's internal system that afternoon, access was denied. My project folders, financial dashboards, even my architectural drafts all blocked. Marcus texted me a single line. "The office feels lighter without you." I typed back, "Then, don't open the windows. You'll suffocate." He didn't reply. But within minutes, my company card was disabled. By evening, Lydia sent another message. "They reassigned your urban renewal project. Said you needed time off." I asked who approved it. She replied, "Your father and Marcus. Together." The word "together" landed heavier than I expected. Family unity. Finally achieved. Just without me. That night, I sat at my dining table, staring at the framed concept sketches from our last successful contract. I didn't feel anger, only precision setting in. They weren't punishing me for canceling a vacation. They were restructuring the narrative, erasing me. Efficiently. So I did what architects do best. I studied the structure, and I started marking where the cracks would give way first. By Monday morning, my access badge wouldn't open the office door. The red light blinked once. Final and precise. I walked past the glass lobby where my own designs framed the walls. Marcus stood inside talking to the receptionist, his voice smug. When he saw me, he didn't even pretend surprise. "Security update," he said lightly. "Nothing personal." I looked at him and answered, "Everything you do is personal." "Marcus, you just hide it under policy." I'm inside the conference room. The team avoided my eyes. My name had vanished from the project screens, replaced by his. I leaned against the doorframe and said, "You really think deleting a name changes who built this place?" Marcus didn't flinch. "You built drawings." "Helena. We built the company." The word we stung more than I wanted to admit. My father walked in. Expression calm. Voice colder. "You're disrupting operations. Go home." I asked. "Is that an order or a favor?" he said. "Consider it both." I left without arguing, because architects know when a structure is already compromised. That evening, I called Lydia. She whispered, "They removed you from payroll. Said you'll get a final check next week." I smiled into the quiet. "Good. That means they're confident." She exhaled. "Confident? About what?" I said. "That I won't fight back." "I do." 2 days later, my corporate email was terminated. My personal messages filled with silence where colleagues used to be. My father's assistant returned my call just to say, "Mr. Ward is unavailable." It was the first time she'd ever called him that to me. I opened my laptop and reviewed the ownership documents I'd kept, a habit my father once called paranoia. Every signature, every clause, every amendment sat neatly archived. I remembered his voice years ago. "Always know what you own. Helena. Never assume loyalty protects it." He must have forgotten he taught me that. That night, Marcus texted again. "It's easier this way. The firm needs stability." I typed back, "Stability built on theft collapses faster." He wrote nothing else. I looked around my apartment. The drawings, the files, the blueprints stacked like silent witnesses. They hadn't just removed me. They'd rewritten me out of the story. So I did what I was trained to do. I started planning the rebuild. This time with demolition in mind. I spent 3 nights going through the archives I'd kept from the firm. Not looking for revenge, but for leverage. Old contracts. Scanned agreements. Forgotten correspondence. It was all there. Organized in folders I'd named after project codes. On the 4th night, buried inside a file labeled Equity Transfer 2013, I found a loan agreement signed by my parents and Adrian Cole. The amount was clear, $600,000. Secured against their personal shares in Ward and Partners. The clause that followed was sharper than any blade. If the business faced operational instability, the lender could demand full repayment within 30 days. My portion had never been part of that deal. The next morning, I called Adrian and asked for coffee. He sounded wary, but curiosity brought him to a quiet cafe downtown. When he sat across from me, I said, "You probably think I'm here to renegotiate something." He studied me, calculating. "You're here to start a fight." I smiled slightly. "No. I'm here to prevent one from spilling onto your investment." He leaned back. "Your father told me the company's solid." I met his eyes. Then he lead. "Contracts are dissolving. Employees are quitting. And leadership is unstable. You know what that means for your collateral." 8. He didn't speak right away. Just traced a finger along the edge of his cup. "You're saying I should call the loan?" I replied, "I'm saying you should protect your money before they bury it under pride." He chuckled once. "You sound just like Samuel," I said. "Then you weren't listening to him long enough." The air between us shifted. His interest turned pragmatic. "If I act, I'll need proof." I slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's documented missed payments. Canceled projects. Falsified PR invoices. You'll see for yourself. I am. He looked down at the drive, then back at me. "And what do you get out of this?" I answered. "Closure. And a reminder to my family that structure only holds when built on truth." He nodded slowly, pocketing the evidence. As he stood, he said, "If you're right, they won't see this coming." I watched him leave, his reflection dissolving in the window glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt the foundation shift, but this time, it was moving under their feet. Not mine. 3 days after that meeting, a courier delivered a thick envelope to my door. The letterhead was familiar, our family attorney. The language was sharper than memory. Allegations of breach of fiduciary duty, demands for my resignation, and a threat of legal action if I didn't comply. I called the number at the bottom and said, "Tell Samuel Ward I'll meet him tomorrow." No lawyers in between. The assistant hesitated. He said, "This isn't open for discussion." I replied, "It will be when I walk in." The next afternoon, I entered the boardroom I'd once helped design. My father sat at the head, Evelyn beside him, Marcus across, all three pretending calm. He started first. "You've made a spectacle of yourself." "Helena, you're out." I sat down slowly. "You mean you're attempting to remove a legal shareholder?" Evelyn's tone was measured. "You're sabotaging the firm's reputation. That's enough cause." I leaned forward. "You forged numbers to impress donors. Don't talk to me about reputation." Marcus smirked. "You sound paranoid," I said. "Paranoia is what people call foresight when it threatens them." End quote. My father's hand slammed the table. "You think you can fight me? You'll lose everything." I looked at him and said, "Then let's put everything on record." He froze for half a second, long enough for me to see it, the first flicker of doubt. I opened the folder I'd brought. "Here's the proposal for an independent audit. I've already submitted it to the regulatory board. If you're confident, you'll have nothing to hide." Evelyn's face tightened. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "You've already dared for me." Dote. That night, I sent a short message to Adrian. "Now's the time." He responded within minutes. "Understood." The following morning, a formal notice of default landed in my parents' inbox, 30 days to repay $600,000 or surrender their shares. The silence that followed was better than applause. When Marcus called later, his voice cracked under the weight of false composure. "You just nuked our company." I said, "No, Marcus. I just drew the floor plan for accountability." He hissed. "You'll regret this." I replied, "Maybe. But at least I'll regret it on my own terms." After he hung up, I sat in the dark, not triumphant, not shaken, just steady. Retribution had started quietly. Exactly how an architect would build it, measured, balanced, and irreversible once the foundation shifted. 2 nights later, the knock came hard enough to rattle the frame. Marcus stood outside, face drawn tight, eyes wild. "You think you're clever?" he shouted before I could speak. "You're destroying Dad's legacy." I didn't step back. "No, Marcus. I'm ending the illusion that legacy and control are the same thing." He paced, fists clenching. "You've humiliated us." "Do you even know what you've done?" I said. "I know exactly what I've done. For the first time, I'm not paying for your mistakes." He stared like he didn't recognize me, then turned and left without another word. By the next morning, the company's internal emails were leaking to clients. 2 resigned contracts, 1 frozen partnership, and a wave of withdrawals from investors who smelled instability. Evelyn called, her tone all sugar and smoke. "You've gone too far." "Helena, this isn't just business, it's blood." I said. "Then maybe you should have treated me like family before treating me like a threat." She exhaled slowly. "You're proving every rumor right." I answered. "Only the ones you started." Within a week, 3 senior architects quit, Lydia told me quietly. They're terrified. Samuel's calling emergency meetings twice a day. I asked, "Is he still pretending I'm on a sabbatical?" She nodded. "He keeps saying you'll come around." I smiled. Then he's building hope on a condemned foundation. When my father finally called, his voice was stripped of anger. "What do you want?" "Helena," I replied. "Everything you built on my back." He was silent for a moment. "You'll ruin us," I said. "No. You already did. I'm just taking my name out of the wreckage." The call ended without goodbye. The sound replaced by a heavy stillness that felt almost merciful. That night, I stood at the window of my apartment overlooking the skyline I'd helped shape. The city lights flickered like a pulse steady. Indifferent. Alive. The firm was collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. And for the first time, I didn't feel crushed beneath it. I felt distance. The kind that comes right before a building gives way and the dust clears enough to see what's left standing. 30 days passed like a countdown with no suspense left to spare. On the morning of the deadline, Adrian called. "They haven't paid a cent," he said. I replied. "Then the transfer proceeds." His tone carried a quiet awe. "You really planned this years ahead," I answered. "No, they did. I just remembered where they buried the clause." By noon, the paperwork was filed. Their shares were gone. Mine remained untouched. The trap had closed exactly as designed. 2 weeks later, the meeting took place in the same boardroom that once felt like home. Samuel sat at the head, Evelyn beside him, Marcus tapping a pen like it might save him. My father spoke first. "You think this makes you powerful?" I said, "No, it makes me free." He scoffed. "You'll collapse without us." I leaned forward. "Watch me," Marcus muttered. "You set us up," I said. "I didn't have to. You handed me everything." Evelyn's voice cracked. "You'd do this to your own parents?" I looked at her evenly. "You taught me to protect what's mine. I'm just honoring the lesson." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this when you realize how alone you are." I stood and slid the signed documents across the table. "I've been alone for years. I just stopped pretending otherwise." He reached for the papers, but I stopped him. "They're copies. The originals are already filed." His eyes dropped. The smallest surrender I'd ever seen. When the signatures were finalized, Adrian handed me the final confirmation. "It's official," he said quietly. I thanked him and turned back to the room. "From this moment, you are no longer authorized to act on behalf of Ward and partners." No one argued. The silence was the cleanest sound I'd heard in months. That night, I returned to the office. Alone, keys in hand. I changed the locks myself, one door after another, until the entire building belonged to me again. The city outside hummed with indifferent noise, but inside, everything was still. The empire they built to contain me now stood entirely in my name. And for the first time, control didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace earned through precision. The silence didn't last. 2 weeks after the takeover, a courier dropped a stack of unmarked envelopes on my desk. The first was from the zoning office, packed with anonymous complaints about noise violations and waste disposal. The second accused me of payroll fraud. Lydia looked pale when she handed them to me. "Someone's trying to bury you in paperwork," she said. I replied, "Then they've forgotten I build structures for a living. I know how to dig out." That night, my attorney called. "Helena, your parents' lawyer's been circulating rumors you're under federal investigation." I asked. "Are we?" He paused. "Of course not. But gossip spreads faster than truth," I said. Good. Let it run. It'll burn out when there's nothing to feed it. By morning, 2 clients had frozen contracts. One wrote, "Just until things settle." I sent back, "They already have." Oh. When the first article appeared in the local business journal, it didn't name us. But every reader in the city knew who the story pointed toward. Financial irregularities under prior leadership. The headline read, "Evelyn's PR empire had finally turned on itself." Marcus left me a voicemail dripping with rage. "You think this makes you look righteous? You're radioactive." I deleted it and whispered, "That's what happens when people touch the truth." Within a month, calls returned. Clients apologized. The noise faded. Rumors collapsed faster than lies built on paper. And mine had already been sealed in ink. Months passed before the quiet felt natural again. The firm steadied itself like a building after an earthquake, same foundation. New balance. Employees who'd once whispered now greeted me without hesitation. Lydia walked into my office one morning, coffee in hand, and said, "It feels lighter now." I looked up from the reports. That's what truth does. It clears the air. She smiled and left. And for the first time in a long while, the silence that followed wasn't heavy. I rebuilt the business slowly. Not as a monument, but as a structure meant to last. Every decision went through the same test. Transparency first. Pride never. Clients returned. Not out of loyalty, but respect. And that was enough. The chaos that had once defined us became a warning label in my mind. Never mistake noise for purpose. Occasionally, someone mentioned seeing my parents at a restaurant, sitting side by side but saying nothing. I never asked for details. The story had finished writing itself. Marcus was gone, leaving behind only unpaid debts and unanswered calls. The distance between us wasn't victory, it was peace earned through exhaustion. Some evenings, I stayed late at the office, watching the city lights flicker across the glass walls. The view hadn't changed, but the meaning had. Control no longer felt like defense, it felt like quiet ownership of what was finally mine. I didn't destroy a family. I just refused to be erased by one. And that refusal, in the end, was enough. Thank you for staying with me through Helena Ward's story. If you believe silence can be stronger than revenge and truth sharper than pride, subscribe for more stories like this. Every week, we uncover lives rebuilt from betrayal, proof that starting over isn't weakness. It's the cleanest form of justice.